Well, good evening here from Dallas, Texas. I am Gustavo Tolosa, the webinar coordinator for tonight. I want to welcome everyone. We see a lot of people coming in from Australia, from Virginia, from Canada, from, oh my goodness, from all over the US, Canada, and all over the world. Thank you for joining us. We have a really exciting topic tonight. Just for those of you who are new here, I want to tell you a little bit about my story and why I'm hosting this webinar with Chef AJ. Like I said earlier, my name is Gustavo Tolosa. I'm actually a professional concert pianist, but I have become passionate about health and a plant-based way of eating. About 3 years ago, I started changing my diet and I lost 70 pounds, over 70 pounds, and I have kept them off. I met Chef AJ about a year and a half, 2 years ago. She's a wonderful vegan, plant-based chef, and she has this amazing book, Unprocessed, and she is the founder of Ultimate Weight Loss Program, and she lives in Los Angeles. So tonight we have her, who is actually in Santa Rosa, California, with Dr. Goldhamer at the True North Health Center, and she's going to introduce him. I just wanted to say a little bit about myself, and I just did. So welcome, and I'm going to welcome Chef AJ. How are you doing, Chef AJ? We're excited to see you.
Everybody, thank you guys so much for being here. Gustavo, I see people from my neck of the woods. I'm seeing Sunland and Laguna.
Yeah, this is great.
My class, I'm in Sherman Oaks. I'm so excited that you're doing this, Gustavo. You know, I'm at True North in Santa Rosa right now. There was a wonderful plant-based conference yesterday in Sacramento put on by Linda Middlesworth called Get Healthy Sacramento. And I spoke along with Dr. Esselstyn, not Dr. Campbell, Dr. Esselstyn, Dr. Goldhamer, Dr. Lyle, Dr. Clapper, and it was a wonderful conference. And Sacramento's a couple hours away from True North, so I hitched a ride with Dr. Clapper, and I'm here for a couple days giving a few talks. And I asked Dr. Goldhamer if he would be kind enough to share some of this information with our webinar audience. And so I'm really excited to have him talk about this topic, which is his passion for over 30 years, water-only fasting. If you don't know Dr. Goldhamer, I really suggest you get his wonderful book that he co-wrote with Dr. Doug Lyle, The Pleasure Trap. It's the best book on the subject I've read. It's one of the best books ever. And if you struggle with anything, whether it's your weight or diabetes or heart disease or autoimmune disease, it doesn't matter, even certain cancers, or even if you're already healthy and just want to stay that way, be with like-minded people, True North will change your life. I came here about 5.5 years ago, fat, sick, on medication, and my life has been changed, and I'm 50 pounds slimmer, and I'm doing what I love, and it's all because of this wonderful place in Santa Rosa. So without further ado, let's introduce the star of the show. This is Dr. Alan Goldhamer.
Thank you for the introduction, Chef AJ, and I want to show everybody here a copy of the book, The Pleasure Trap, that Chef AJ was mentioning a few minutes ago. And how are you, Dr. Goldhamer? We're excited to have you.
Well, I'm doing great. Always anxious to talk about fasting.
Yes, you know, I was there a few weeks ago, and I enjoyed my stay very much. And I didn't have enough time to do the water fasting, but I did a juice fast, and it was amazing. And now I'm getting ready to go back and actually do a water fast.
Yeah, water-only fasting can be a different experience than juice fasting or modified fasting. You know, it's interesting that now fasting has become much more popular. You're seeing a lot more in the popular press about it. A lot of what they're talking about when they talk about fasting, they call intermittent fasting, which is really intermittent feeding. It's a way of modifying your feeding patterns to facilitate weight loss and detoxification. You've got folks advocating calorie restriction. You've got the intermittent fasting, which, for example, they might have you reduce your calories to 600 calories 1 or 2 days a week. They might limit your feeding window where you don't eat before 9 or 10 in the morning. You don't eat after 5 or 6 at night to increase the fasting window between the last meal and the first meal. And this turns out to be an effective weight loss strategy and may give the body some benefits, although that's not what I'm talking about today. What I'm talking about today is the complete abstinence of all substances except water in an environment of complete rest or therapeutic water-only fasting. And, you know, they talk, sometimes in the scientific literature, they use fasting and starvation as if they're the same thing. That's not actually true. Fasting is that period where you have labile reserves that you can call upon. If you fast long enough, eventually you deplete your reserves, and then you enter a process called starvation. And starvation ultimately results in death. So we tend not to do that here because that would be really bad for our outcome.
Right.
What's interesting is that humans are different than most of the other animals that we share the planet with in the sense that we can fast. By definition, fasting involves the conversion of our brain, which is the main burner of glucose in our bodies, from burning glucose or sugar to burning fat. In particular, it's a type of fat from ketone bodies called beta-hydroxybutyric acid. So the body goes through this ketosis process. It's able to free up beta-hydroxybutyric acid. Our brain changes fuels. That turned out to be really important to humans because were it not for our ability to fast, we could have never wandered away from the tropical areas where food's available all year round. Because the first time spring came late, all the humans would have died. We have this huge bulbous neuronal net at the end of our spinal column called the brain that burns is our main source of burning glucose. So the ability to fast turned out to be what's called a biological adaptation. This was something that the body had to have in order to adapt to our wandering ways. So it's not surprising that fasting turns out to be a safe and effective tool for humans because we're kind of wired to be able to do that. It's a fundamental part of who we are as people. Now, there are some individuals, for example, people that have a genetic defect called MCAD, medium chain acetylcoenzyme A dehydrogenase deficiency. They wouldn't be able to fast because they can't break down fatty acids and make use of it effectively. So, but that's like 1 in 10,000 people. Everybody else is able to do this fasting process. When we talk about fasting, we talk about there's kind of 4 basic overlapping phases of fasting. The first is one everybody experiences. It's what we call the gastrointestinal phase. That's where you eat stuff, you burn up the stuff you've eaten, and then eventually there's nothing left. And so either you eat again, or you begin a process called glyconeogelysis, where you're breaking down glycogen stores. Glycogen is stored inside the cells, particularly the muscle cells. And so you break down glycogen stores and get glucose from that. Now that goes for a couple days, unless you like run a marathon. Then at about 20 miles, you run out of glycogen stores. And then once you've run out of glycogen, if you haven't eaten again, then you enter a process called gluconeogenesis, where your body begins to break down protein. And this is a problem because if you are very active, you need more glucose, which means you need to break down more protein, which is why when we fast people, we do it in a medically supervised setting under a restful environment and under supervision. Once you've gone into a fast for 2 or 3 days, your body begins this conversion to the fasting process. You develop ketosis, which is where the body's beginning to break down the fat. And by the end of the second week of fasting, almost all of your energy is coming from fat. So unlike, say, chimpanzees, which would continue to burn glucose, really wouldn't be able to go very long, humans can go a long time. In fact, the average 70-kilogram male can fast probably around 70 days. Not that we would necessarily recommend fasting that long. In fact, we rarely fast patients over 40 days. But essentially, this process of fasting is about using your fat stores, conserving your protein stores, and allowing the body to continue through this process, hopefully safely and effectively. It's interesting when we talk about indications for fasting, like why somebody would fast. You know, the most obvious indication is actually the loss of appetite that characterizes acute disease. When people get ill, they lose their desire to eat. Maybe there's a reason for that. Same thing with animals. Animals will naturally fast when they become ill. We use fasting both with people that have acute illnesses and with people that have chronic illnesses, because it turns out conditions that are caused by dietary excess, or eating too much of the wrong things, and they accumulate materials within their cells that are detrimental. When you fast, the body reverses that process. So it's a rapid way of mobilizing and eliminating these accumulated intermediary products of metabolism and detoxifying the body. We use fasting to try to speed healing on things that aren't healing quick enough. We use it to change behaviors. For example, people that quit smoking or drinking or using drugs during fasting find that the time it takes to adapt to that drug-free state is much reduced. So you quit smoking. Most smokers by the end of the second day are not complaining about withdrawals from cigarettes. Some people say it's because they're so miserable from the fasting, they don't think to complain, but that's not really true. And it's probably also interesting to note that every major religion, from the Jews to the Jain, the Muslims, the Hindus, the Christians, all have traditions about fasting. And that's probably not without reason. Fasting changes how you feel about yourself and the world around you. So from our viewpoint, one of the most important things is make sure that patient selection is done effectively. That is, that people that are good candidates at that particular time in their life to fast are fasting, and people that are not good candidates for fasting do not fast. And we've done that successfully for the last 32 years, and I can prove that because we've had over 15,000 people undergo this process, and everybody that walked into fast so far has been able to walk out. So we're trying to preserve our history of success with fasting. And we do that by taking a complete medical history, doing a physical exam, and providing baseline laboratory evaluations. And doing that evaluation process, you then have baseline you can compare back to help differentiate the healing crisis, which is a body's an attempt to heal itself by generating acute responses from a problem. So obviously they can look similar. That's why it's important that we have appropriate testing and monitoring so we can tell the difference between a good thing and maybe something that's not so good. Fasting duration is an interesting topic because it ranges in fast from 5 to 40 days. And you can't just tell because a person's big or small or what their particular condition is exactly how the fast is going to go. So we use fasting both diagnostically as well as therapeutically. So a lot of times you can tell by what's happening in the fast, what's really going on underneath as a causal agent in their problems. Now, in our experience, we've used fasting, and we can talk about that soon in relation to specific scientific studies where we've actually taken conditions, put people through fasting, and determine how effective, how safe and effective the process is. And what's interesting is, if you look at the diseases that are caused by dietary excess, by eating too much, excess fat, excess protein, too many calories, you find certain classes of diseases, like you get high blood pressure and cardiovascular disease and diabetes and obesity, autoimmune diseases like lupus and rheumatoid arthritis and ulcerative colitis and asthma, eczema, psoriasis, and these Hashimoto's thyroiditis, these conditions that all have some tie-ins to dietary choices, not surprisingly, are the same conditions that respond well to fasting. In fasting, the body gets a chance to mobilize and eliminate these accumulated materials that build up in between the cells, in the cells, and go through, in essence, a detoxification process. So there's actually a little bit of a logic to it. At first blush, it seems like, how could these different conditions all respond to the same simple intervention? It's because these different conditions all have some common causal factors. So when we talk about mechanisms by which fasting may help people, we know that weight loss is certainly, you can't help but lose weight. Laws of physics and thermodynamics says if you go on a fast, you're going to lose weight. And we know from experience that average weight loss is about 1 pound a day. There's also a process called natriuresis in fasting, where the body selectively eliminates the accumulated excess salt that accumulates in people that are eating conventional diets. And when the salt goes out, the blood volume goes out, then the blood pressure goes down, the swelling, the joint pain, the asthma, all of these edematous conditions tend to improve. There is detoxification that occurs. In fact, this has been one of the criticisms in the past of fasting, that the body so rapidly detoxifies itself that maybe it doesn't know what it's doing, and that there might be danger to that. And it turns out that doesn't seem to be the case in appropriately selected patients. The body regulates this quite well. And it does, in fact, mobilize these accumulated products and eliminate them. And you can, lots of studies looking at pre-post fat biopsies or looking at total measure blood levels of before and after, and there's a consistent response of reducing those accumulated materials. Fasting also affects insulin resistance. Insulin is the hormone that drives sugar from your bloodstream into the cells. If there's resistance to the function of insulin, what happens is blood sugar levels rise, and we call that diabetes. Diabetes mellitus is, in fact, a condition not of lack of insulin, but lack of insulin's effectiveness because of insulin resistance. And it turns out the diet that makes you fat is the same diet that tends to cause insulin resistance and lead to diabetes and related conditions. And fasting reverses that. Fasting also has a profound effect on the digestive system. You have kind of a tunnel. It starts in your mouth, and it goes down your digestive system, and ultimately it ends at a hole at the other end called the anus. So you're kind of, digestion is essentially shoving stuff in one hole and trying to eventually push it out the other hole. But while the material is passing through that tunnel, it's not technically in your body. You swallowed it. It seems like it disappeared, but it's actually more passing through your body than actually in your body. Unless the material is able to get through a very fine mesh, the gastrointestinal mucosa, there's little fine, it's almost like a screen. And just like a screen can keep flies out, unless the screen is torn, the intestinal mucosa keeps out large molecules. Even protein molecules don't get through that. It has to be an amino acid or glucose. If there's damage, in the case of humans, from free radicals that might lead to a widening of that screen or a tearing or damage of that screen that will allow things to leak through, we call that gut leakage, you're relatively protected. But if proteins leak through, your body's immune system will react to it. Now, normally in small quantities, it's not a big deal. The body's immune system reacts, it catabolizes, it gets rid of it, eats it up, whatever, you're okay. But in genetically vulnerable people, sometimes the immune system in protecting you can become confused. And if your immune system begins to attack your colon, we may call that ulcerative colitis or Crohn's disease. If your immune system attacks your thyroid, we might call it Hashimoto's thyroiditis. If your immune system attacks your skin, we might label that vasculitis. If it's your kidneys, it might be systemic lupus erythematosus. The point is, all of these itis conditions or autoimmune conditions are your immune system attacking your tissues. And they'll tell you, well, we don't know why that happens. We'll just shut down the immune system with prednisone or methotrexate or what have you, and then you'll feel better. And at first, it's like a dream because you do feel better. And then it becomes a nightmare because it turns out you need your immune system. And so shutting off the immune system with powerful drugs isn't always the best long-term strategy at rebuilding and sustaining health. And so the idea with fasting is it gives the digestive system a rest, the gut leakage can heal, and then when we put people on exclusively plant food diets free of added SOS, SOS of course is the international symbol of danger, it also stands for sugar, including refined carbohydrates, oil, and salt. When we get rid of all these processed chemicals from the diet, what happens is you're able to minimize the inflammation, eliminate the gut leakage, and now all of a sudden you can manage these conditions very successfully. People can get off their drugs, they can get out of pain. Now, they're not cured. You don't cure obesity. You don't cure hypertension. You don't cure autoimmune disease. You manage these conditions. If you're obese and you go back to eating greasy, fatty, slimy, dead, decaying flesh and highly processed foods, you're going to get fat again. If you have high blood pressure, you go back to the salty processed diets that lead to the problem, you're going to get high blood pressure again. And if you have autoimmune disease, you're only going to find freedom to the degree that you're willing to comply with the diet and lifestyle changes. The other mechanism which fasting seems to have a profound effect on is the autonomic balance in the body. You know, the nervous system that controls the things you don't think about. Like, for example, if you go running, your heart automatically speeds up. You don't have to tell it to do that. And what tells it to do that is the automatic or autonomic nervous system, which has two parts, the sympathetic and parasympathetic, that work kind of in contrast with each other. If one or the other tone gets too high, you may get symptoms. For example, if you have a hypersympathetic tone in your nervous system, you might have constipation. Or if you have a hyperparasympathetic tone, you might have symptoms like diarrhea, or cramping, pain, etc. So the idea is you want to keep those systems in balance. And although we have lots of tools to try to do that, for example, almost all the natural therapies affect the autonomic nervous system: chiropractic and osteopathic manipulation, biofeedback, physical therapy, meditation, yoga, stretching. All these things work, at least in part, to the degree that they help balance out the autonomic nervous system. Well, one of the most powerful ways of rebooting the autonomic nervous system is fasting. It's kind of like taking a computer with a corrupted hard drive and rebooting it. You don't exactly know why, but an awful lot of stuff starts working again. Another thing we talked about with fasting was this idea of psycho-spiritual impact. Now, we don't have a particular flavor of religion that we advocate or anything. We don't know how to get into heaven. We don't know anything about that. What we do know, though, is that all religions seem to have a common affection for fasting. And it's probably because it has a profound effect on how you feel about yourself and the world around you. Fasting also enhances the immune system. Most people think, oh, if you go on a fast and didn't eat, you would suppress your immune system and be vulnerable to infection or whatever. It turns out that fasting enhances the measures that we can measure, the objective measures of immune function, helper, killer, T cell activity, neutrophil phagocytosis, etc. And so it seems to be helpful at allowing the body to heal things that sometimes it's having trouble doing in the normal state. And then finally, taste and adaptation. Fasting changes how foods taste. Foods that do not taste good sometimes to people, because they're addicted to the artificial stimulation of dopamine in their brain from the pleasure trap, can go on a fast, and then they can find that good foods start to taste good again. And that's a hugely useful tool in helping motivate behavioral changes. Just get people to do a fast, and then they realize, oh, this is, I am amenable to a health-promoting diet and lifestyle. So, those are all mechanisms we think are likely involved in why we see the results that we see in treating patients that have disease processes. Now, you mentioned earlier about the experience of fasting and what happens to people when they do fast. And it's not always completely pleasant, because particularly depending on how well people prepare, people that have been on a vegan, SOS-free diet prepare really well, generally have a relatively uneventful fast. I know myself, I fast every year, my staff, usually not much comes up because we're living healthy. We don't smoke, we don't drink, we don't eat animal fats, living on a health-promoting diet. There's not a lot of accumulated materials that can build up. But for people that are living normally and consuming animal products, processed foods, etc., sometimes their body will go through rapid detoxification. And so they'll get, for example, a foul taste in the mouth. It can taste like something crawled in there and died. We call it faster's mouth. Increased body odor to the point where sometimes people don't even want to be in the room with themselves. They can have fatigue or sleep disturbance, vivid dreams. They can go through various forms of irritability. Dizziness. If you get up too quickly, you can get dizzy because your body blood pressure is dropping, the body's going to conservation mode. Aches and pains. A lot of times early in fasting, people get some low back pain as the kidneys are dumping a lot of stuff. Nausea and vomiting. If you're getting a lot of dumping out of your liver because you've been on a high-fat processed diet, you may dump a lot of the excess bile acids, and so that can cause some nausea, even a little bit of vomiting. People get rashes and discharges as the skin is a secondary eliminative organ, and dramatic heightened senses as the body adapts to the fasting process. And then, of course, probably the most classic is the healing crisis, where a chronic problem becomes acute, can be uncomfortable, the body goes through a healing process, and then hopefully it resolves. So these symptoms of fasting are all common, and one of the reasons why some people that don't want to experience that more intense rapid healing might want to slow that down. We use juice fasting or modified versions that can still be effective but are much gentler, much slower than the water-only fasting. For me, I find the water-only fasting much more entertaining in watching patients go through these processes. So what I'd like to just, if I can, summarize what I've said, and then maybe if we have questions or other things, we can certainly begin to answer that. So, fasting effects. We know that fasting decreases blood sugar and IGF-1. IGF-1 is insulin growth factor 1. The higher the IGF-1 is associated with higher aging processes, higher disease vulnerability. So a reduction in IGF-1 is thought to be highly desirable. There's two things I know that reduce IGF-1. One is fasting, the other is exercise. Fasting decreases blood pressure and heart rate. In fact, we have profound effects on blood pressure. People come in sometimes 220 over 120 on max meds, end up with normal blood pressure without any medication. And we do that very consistently. For people that are interested, they can go to our website, healthpromoting.com. They can download the articles, the published studies that we've had under a learning section. The results are really quite remarkable. Fasting decreases insulin, which is why we do so well with type 2 diabetes. Diabetics are often able to normalize their blood sugar level to eliminate the need for medication. Fasting decreases inflammation and oxidation, which is why it's so helpful in treating patients with chronic pain syndromes. It decreases the total microbial load in your gut. I want you to think about this. 70% of the cells associated with your immune system are involved with your digestive tract, which makes sense because, when you're eating, you're taking in all kinds of foreign material from the outside. So it's not surprising that the immune system would be heavily involved in the digestive system. Much of what's going on in the GI system is various types of bacteria, which can be helpful or hurtful. Necessary for our survival, but also can be a problem, as we've experienced. Anybody that's had food poisoning or developed a GI infection knows. And one of the problems is these bacteria that make up the bulk of our stool have their own waste products, some of which are toxic to us, exotoxins and other byproducts. So if your microbial balance is thrown out of whack because of poor dietary choices or medical treatment like antibiotics, that can have a profound effect on your body's immune system's ability to defend itself and maintain health. So now people are doing probiotics and lots of pills and things trying to get the balance back. The most powerful way to balance the microbiota of your gut is to do a fast and then go on an exclusively plant food diet. Sometimes even people trying to eat a vegan diet get into trouble because they're eating very high sugar diets. They're using agave and maple syrup and all kinds of processed chemicals, which can lead to microbial imbalance in the gut, rather than the whole foods, the fruits, the vegetables, the steamed and starchy vegetables in particular. And so by getting people on a plant-based diet, one of the profound effects we may find is that by normalizing the gut microbiota as a consequence of the diet as a whole, we have a profound influence on the immune system and on the healing of the body. Fasting also increases leptin. And leptin is the satiety hormone, which is why people after they fast are often surprised. They think they're going to be ravenous and going to want to eat everything under the sun, but actually they find they're relatively easily satisfied after fasting because their actual brain chemistry balance has been normalized. And so now they want to eat enough to maintain optimum weight, but not necessarily their old or current weight. Fasting increases insulin sensitivity. It actually allows the insulin to work better. It increases cellular stress resistance and cellular stress adaptation. What that means is that it turns out healthy cells do really well in normal cells, human cells, do well in the fasting state where it's an adaptation, we're adapted to that. But cancer cells, for example, do not. Cancer cells do not adapt to the stress associated with the fasting state because they have a much higher metabolic rate often than normal cells do, and that makes them vulnerable in the fasting state, more so than healthy cells, which is why people like Walter Longo at USC are doing studies showing that rats, for example, with cancer, that you give them enough chemotherapy to kill all the cancer cells and you kill all the rats. But if you fast the rats at the same time with the same therapy, the rats survive and they have dramatically higher cancer-free survival. So it's just a trick of making some cells more vulnerable to cancer therapy. And of course, there needs to be research done about how much the body's actually able to do on its own. Fasting increases autophagy, which is the cell's ability to actually eat up bacteria and viruses and cancer cells, the white blood cell's ability to do that. Fasting stimulates B-cell immunity, and it reverses essentially all of the abnormalities associated with metabolic syndrome. So we've got here a tool that is very, very powerful, and it's starting to gain some recognition, in part because there are drug companies willing to sponsor studies trying to identify what is the mechanisms by which fasting works, presumably so they can come up with drugs that will do the same thing fasting does. Right. Fortunately, we don't have to wait for those drugs to come along because you can actually do the fasting, give the body a chance to heal itself. And for appropriately selected patients, this is a very powerful intervention. We're very excited. We're the True North Health Foundation, our 501c3 nonprofit research-based organization, is now have an affiliation with Luigi Fontana and the Buck Institute, as well as other researchers, and we're able to begin moving forward now at identifying these mechanisms and taking advantage of some of the new science that's available to us to figure out how it is that fasting is getting these people well. And hopefully it'll help us do what we do better, learn to develop non-invasive diagnostic markers so we can tell who should fast, when they should fast, how long, rather than just relying on clinical experience alone. So we're very excited about all this stuff. Again, people that are interested in this should know that, or if they want to know whether this is good for them, we offer a really nice service, which is you can go onto our website at healthpromoting.com, complete the registration forms, which gets me your medical history information, and then you can call for a no-cost consultation with me. And we offer a brief consultation to kind of see, are you a person that might benefit from any of this information, or are there things you can know about that you don't know about that might be helpful? Doesn't cost you anything, but we're certainly happy to talk to your listeners.
This is such a fascinating topic. I really appreciate the overview that you gave us. Could we, unless you have something else to add, could we pose some questions for you?
Absolutely. Be happy to answer any questions that your listeners have.
Very good, very good. Dr. Goldhamer, the fasting that goes on at True North is medically supervised, correctly?
It is. So every patient that's here is under the direct supervision of one of our staff doctors. We have 12 clinicians here at the center. We have 4 medical doctors, 2 naturopathic physicians. We have chiropractors. We also have some PhDs. We have Dr. Lyle, our clinical psychologist, and we also have Tasha Myers, our PhD research scientist as well. We also, so everybody gets a history exam, laboratory evaluation. Each patient is seen twice a day by one of our staff doctors. So we're taking vitals, monitoring them carefully, doing the appropriate blood and urine testing. We have an extensive educational program. They have 3 programs a day at 10, 2, and 6:30, where we cooking classes, lectures, all that kind of stuff. And so it's a pretty tight clinical setting, and we limit it to patients that we expect to have good outcomes in. So we're really working on trying to help people that are going to make us look good and have a good clinical experience.
Right. What would you tell people that ask if this is something, water fasting, if it's something that they can do at home?
Well, with water fasting, I think that's better done in a controlled setting. First of all, you do need to have a history exam in lab. You do need to be in a situation where you can be monitored. And fasting, particularly for people that have health issues, can become a rather exciting process. So we certainly want to, make sure it's a safe and effective one. However, there are things you can do at home safely, and the intermittent fasting or intermittent feeding programs are ones that can get you the results. It's not quite as quick. It's certainly not quite as dramatic, but it's safe. And people can go onto the website, download Dr. Morano's article on that, and that would teach them how they can do that safely, and you can get much of the weight benefits and other things. Now, my caution is for anybody that's on medications. Medications can be really nasty, and modifying medications can be a difficult process. So you definitely want to consult with a physician that's not a complete idiot about how to get off the drug safely, how to do what they need to do so that we don't make a problem worse because of complications from medication issues. But water fasting is really not one of those things that's really done best at home. There are some things that are just better done in a controlled setting. It happens to be one of them.
Right. And there are some medications that you really cannot stop taking, I think. Is that correct?
Yeah, and in those patients, sometimes we have to modify the program to adapt to their needs. Some medications, for example, steroids, need to be weaned off very slowly. If you get too aggressive, you can actually end up damaging or killing somebody. There are other medications, cardiac rhythm medications, that would be very dangerous to withdraw. So it is important that a patient's medical management and history be taken into consideration before recommendation. But that's also why we offer free initial consultations on the phone, so people can know whether they're a good candidate before they have to decide about coming in or anything like that. We can help them do that remotely.
Right. And what I'm going to do later on is I'm going to put the information, the phone number and the email and all that on the screen so people can actually get in touch with you. Someone is asking here if there are any issues with muscle wasting during water-only fasting.
Absolutely. The concern is if you're too active during fasting, you increase protein utilization, and that could lead to depletion over time. The good news is, though, when you rest, you can minimize that. The protein utilization drops from 75 grams a day initially down to just 25 grams a day, and even less as you adapt to the fasting. So there's always a little bit of labile protein that's utilized during fasting that you have to rebuild when you come off the fast. But you're not going to lose any muscle cells per se, just a little bit of the juice that's needed to maintain the basic baseline levels of glucose needed by the brain. So even long into a fast, you're still burning a little bit of glucose, but that dramatically reduces if you rest. The mistake people make is they'll want to keep going to work or keep exercising. Now, it's true. If you're very active in fasting, you'll feel better. You won't be getting better, but you'll feel better. Now, we don't really care how you feel. We care whether you get well or not. So I'm not interested if you feel well. I'm worried if you get well. And so that means resting, although you won't feel as well, you'll be getting well. And that's one of the things why we talk about gluconeogenesis and how important it is not to, say, try to fast for a month and still maintain normal activities. That would not be advisable.
Right. What would you say that the minimum fasting period would be to see any benefits?
Well, I think some people get the benefit from that 8 hours they do even at night, when you eat your dinner and then you go to bed, and even extending that to 12 or 16 hours turns out to have benefit over time. So I'm not sure that there's a minimum level of time where you'll get benefit. However, for some things like taste or adaptation and really making a change, we like to see at least 5 days of fasting if possible, because it does take a little time just to adapt to the fast, kick in the intense detox process. And then if that goes without any excitement, you can be more confident that there's not a heavy backlog. On the other hand, an awful lot of people, once they get into fasting, even if they think they're healthy, they find out they're not quite as healthy as they might have thought.
Right, right. Dr. Goldhamer, someone is asking here a very good question, and of course I think that True North can benefit anybody. It's an amazing place that I highly recommend. But here we have one of the participants asking if a person, let's see, do I need to be sick or ill to attend True North, or can a healthy, obese person benefit from fasting?
I personally think, and I can't prove this yet, we're going to be investigating this, but I personally believe that the people that are going to get the very most benefit from fasting are healthy people that are using it preventatively. And these tend to be relatively shorter fasts. And as I said, from a health promotion, health prevention standpoint, I think that's going to turn out to be true. Now, again, we don't have good research on that yet. That's coming. So we actually, remember, even though we see a lot of really sick people, we also see a lot of really healthy people. And part of that is because the people that used to be really sick are now really healthy, and they come back on a health promotion preventative basis. A lot of people use us because they don't have confidence in their local physicians. They'll come in once a year, they'll have a little stay, they'll get an exam, they'll get their yearly evaluation done. We yell at them or nag them a little bit, get them back, tightening up the screws. Some people have autoimmune diseases where maybe they have to fast once or twice a year in order to maintain control of their condition. Some people have been very ill, and it might take several fasts to actually get them to the level that they want to get to. I know you're going to have trouble believing this. There are some people that come in and get well, but then they might slip off track a little bit. And so they may need kind of a little refresher to kind of get back on track, re-clear their palate, tighten up the screws on their diet again. And so there's a lot of different kinds. I actually have people that are businessmen that stay with us because we're less expensive than the local hotel, and so they come in when they're in town just because they like getting all their meals in an affordable place to stay. So lots of different motivations for people that come to us. Some people come in over our holiday extravaganza just to escape the holidays. They come in and join Chef AJ and the rest of our we offer a 10-day program over the holidays that's a little bit more festive, not so much fasting oriented, and lots of cooking classes and all that. And so they do it just as an affordable way to get away and have a vacation and come home healthy and fit instead of, fat and sick and miserable.
Right, right. A very, I think, very good question is, how do you handle someone who comes to True North and is very, very slim, very thin, but this person is suffering some autoimmune disorders? I mean,
well, sometimes, interestingly enough, a short fast can be helpful enough that it will allow people to then be able to regain weight. So if you've got disruption of your gut microbiota, and we kind of reset that with a few days of fasting, even in a thin person, sometimes then when we feed them the same diet, now they're able to start regaining, making use of their diet more effectively. Other times we wouldn't do fasting, but we would do dietary refinement. And a lot of times we can fine-tune the diet so that people can be able to regain weight. It's actually harder treating chronically underweight people than it is overweight people. Overweight people, everything's working. They're just getting too much concentrated food. They're caught in the pleasure trap. Underweight people may be having disease processes going on where they're not able to absorb well. So, it's actually, as I said, a much more serious concern, the underweight, than it is the overweight. Now, the problem today is some people think they're underweight, not because they're underweight at all. They might be perfect weight, because everybody else is fat. By comparison, everybody's worried about them because they're not having, layers of extra tissue on board.
Right, right. Dr. Goldhamer, how do people find out what the cost of doing a water fast at True North is? Is that on the website, or is that something that when they call?
Yeah, they can go to our website at healthpromoting.com, or they can call the center. Our rate structure is real simple. It starts at $149 a night, includes everything we do other than the initial medical exam. And so most people find our rates to be more or less affordable, and certainly dramatically competitive, in the sense that I think we're probably the lowest cost.
Oh, I know it is.
And we can do that in part because we do operate as a 501c3 nonprofit foundation. So we're able to. Our primary mission here is public education and research. We're able to do that. Part of keeping the rates affordable is because this is not a quick process for many patients. And so you have to make it so people can afford to come in, stay long enough. If they need to come back, they can, in order to get the long-term clinical outcome results and make us look good. So, we're motivated in part because we do want to get those dramatic long-term outcomes. And so part of that is keeping the rates affordable.
Right.
And because of the nature of our operation, we don't have any stockholders. We're not beholden to anybody. And we have a little more flexibility than other organizations might.
Right, right. You know, when I was there, I was surprised to see that there were people that had been there for like 3 or 4 months. And I'm sure, yeah.
Some people have problems that are quite involved. And other
Right.
people, you know, the truth is I have patients that, you know, kind of move in because the truth is it's cheaper living here, even under care, than it is sometimes free living. You know, by the time you're doing apartments and cars and all that other stuff, you know, it can really add up. For example, we have people sometimes that are here that might be have otherwise been in senior housing or something, and they come in and they might be with us for a while, but then they get to go home instead of going off to the nursing home. And you know, our monthly rates are sometimes a couple $1,000 a month less than the equivalent senior housing equivalent.
Exactly.
So, you know, by having affordable rates, it gives more people the opportunity to try to access care.
Right. Dr. Goldhamer, is there a specific type of water that people drink during the water fast? And one more thing, and how much water do people drink every day?
So we monitor their urine with specific gravity to make sure they're getting enough. But typically the rule of thumb is at least 40 ounces of distilled water a day. We use distilled water because it's the purest water. Any highly filtered water would probably be acceptable, but people that are fasting will not tolerate municipal water and water with a bunch of stuff in it.
Right.
So we use fractionally steamed distilled water that's run through a pre and post filter. We monitor the urine output and we look at the specific gravity to ensure that people aren't getting too concentrated. The problem with fasting is you have to have a solute to put the materials, for the body to put the materials it's eliminating in. So if you allow a person to dehydrate, you're not going to detox as well. So we want to make sure you get enough. Now, on the other hand, too much isn't good either, because you can flush out your sodium and all that. So we're, you know, looking at around 40 to 60 ounces of water for most people as an average.
Right, right. Dr. Goldhamer, are you familiar with the research that Walter Longo at USC is doing?
Yes. Yeah, in fact, that Journal of Metabolism article is the one I was citing earlier. In fact, he cites our studies in his article on hypertension. And I always say I evaluate other people based intelligence. I evaluate their intelligence based on how much they agree with me. And so the fact that he puts our studies in his paper means he must be a damn near genius.
That's right. That's good.
He's working right now with intermittent fasting. So he's not actually doing prolonged water-only fasting. So he's doing a little bit different work than the work that we're doing here at the True North Health Center.
Right, right. Well, I'm going to ask you one more question, then we'll let you go because I know how busy you are. And there's one person here that has a question that I've, let me see. What are your thoughts in regards to coffee enema to help the detox process during a fast?
Well, we would definitely not use coffee or any other highly addictive nervous system stimulant that contains caffeine in fasting. Now, as far as coffee enemas, the claim is that it has a stimulatory effect on detoxification of the liver. I would love to see actual any data that shows that that claim is true, and then we could reevaluate it. But at this point, I've not been convinced that that's an enhancing component. We certainly don't use it at the True North Health Center. I know it is commonly used by other centers, but I really haven't yet been able to find any data that supports the claims that are made. But again, that may very well be true, and I just haven't seen it. If any of your listeners have the data, I'd love to review it.
Right, right, exactly. Yeah, there some of these studies, we wonder how.
Yeah, well, you know, my dad always said it's always good to keep an open mind, but don't let your brains fall out.
Right, exactly. We might have to do this another time in the future, Dr. Goldhamer, because there are so many people that are interested in asking questions, but we're almost at an hour and we'll probably need to close.
Well, I would love to do it again. Thank you for exposing your viewers to our thinking.
Yes, yes. Well, I hope that people will truly try True North and will go and visit. And I know that I will be there in a few months, and I look forward to seeing you again. And Chef AJ, are you still there?
I wanted to tell everyone watching, because the question for coffee enemas came up today when Dr. Goldhamer did a Facebook Live on a different topic. And if anyone would like to see this wonderful 47-minute presentation, they just need to go to my public Facebook page, Chef AJ, and it's pinned at the top, and it's a really wonderful talk on the 10, what was it, the 10 most important
things to achieve health.
To achieve health. He's a fabulous lecturer, and thank you so much, everyone, for watching. And don't you told them about the free consult if they want to, right? So
right. Well, thank you, and we will see you sometime soon. Okay. Good night.